So hello and welcome to yet another episode of Biographics. I'm your host Carl Smallwood, and today we're talking about Napoleon II, the Emperor for 20 days. And I should note that like all of our videos here on Biographics, this one is based on original articles submitted to us by our writing team, that being Arnoldo Teodrani. You can find links to their socials below alongside my own, but let's get to it. On December 2nd, 1804, Napoleon Bonaparte crowned himself the Emperor of the French, becoming Napoleon I. Years after his downfall, on December 2nd, 1852, his nephew, Louis Napoleon, reinstated the empire, styling himself as Napoleon III. So the first, followed by the third. You may have noticed something is slightly amiss here. The great Corsican general had a son who theoretically ruled for a handful of days. This young man led most of his short life trapped in a gilded cage by his father's enemies. This tragic figure was feared by European rulers and yet is largely overlooked by history. This is the story of the boy who will become known as the King of Rome, the Duke of the Reichstag and France, but would be buried as Napoleon II. In 1809, Napoleon Bonaparte divorced his first wife, Josephine, on the grounds that she could not sire him an heir. The emperor needed a clear line of succession, so he was remarried to Marie-Louise, the daughter of Austrian Emperor Franz I. On March 20th, 1811, Napoleon was delighted to welcome a baby boy, christened Napoleon Francois Charles Joseph. His birth was announced by the sound of exactly 101 cannon shots, followed by his father's enthusiastic predictions, which are, and I quote, "I envy that boy. Glory is waiting there for him. I will have been Philip, he will be Alexander. He only has to extend an arm, and the world is his." Napoleon Sr. was of course referring to Philip of Macedonia and his son Alexander the Great, envisioning a future of conquest and success for his son. Fittingly, given his father, Napoleon Jr. was bestowed with a number of grandiose titles, such as Prince Imperial and King of Rome. The latter style carried mostly symbolic weight, as it indicated continuity with the Holy Roman Empire. Napoleon Jr. showed great interest in all things military from a tender age, playing with flags, trumpets, drums, and the wooden blocks used by his dad to mark the movements of troops, which can't imagine would have been great for Napoleon while planning battles, of like, oh, just suddenly a juice bottle appears on the table. I guess that's part of the battle plans now. He was an intelligent and precocious toddler who spent much of his time playing with his father. This strong bond was severed on January 24th, 1814, when Napoleon bade goodbye to his family to fight the Sixth Coalition in the campaign of France. Father and son would never meet again. On April 4th, the victorious coalition entered Paris and Napoleon abdicated in favour of his son. The 3-year-old King of Rome suddenly became Emperor of the French as Napoleon II. His auspicious reign came to an end just 2 days later when Napoleon Sr. redrafted his abdication, excluding his descendants from power. Then on the 9th, Napoleon Jr. and his mother Marie-Louise left Paris. The powerful Austrian Minister of Foreign Affairs, Prince Metternich, ensured that mother and child reached Vienna on April 23rd. From then on, the young Napoleon would live at the court of his grandfather, Emperor Franz I, as his father was sent to exile in the island of Elba. The prince was strictly forbidden from ever visiting his dad. To further sever his ties with his infamous father, Grandpa Franz and Metternich took to calling him by his second name, Francois. Later, they adopted the German translation, Franz, and gave him the title of the Duke of the Reichstag to turn him into a proper Austrian aristocrat. As for his mother, she was installed as the Duchess of Parma, northern Italy, a satellite state of Austria. The role granted her a substantial income but kept her apart from her son. The final move from Grandpa Franz and Prince Metternich to assert control over the boy. In February 1815, Napoleon Sr. fled, returned to France and resumed his campaigns, eventually being defeated at Waterloo on June 18th. The fallen emperor abdicated once again in favour of his son. Being only 4 years old, he was probably more preoccupied with chocolates and toy soldiers, and therefore did not grasp that he had become, once again, Emperor Napoleon II. And we should clarify that only staunch, and this is a word I'm so glad I'm being paid money to say, Bonapartists ever recognised young Franz as a legitimate successor to Napoleon I. At the Congress of Vienna that followed the Napoleonic Wars, the major European powers agreed to void all titles and rights for Napoleon's descendants, so eat that 4-year-old. In any case, the contested reign of Napoleon II lasted a whopping grand total of 20 days, and July 8th, in fact, the old Bourbon monarchy was restored under King Louis XVIII. Napoleon II became just Franz once again and lived the rest of his life under the watchful eyes of Grandpa and Metternich. The two wanted to turn the boy into a dependable, loyal Austrian prince and thus entrusted him to the care of military tutors. Franz had a knack for all things military, as you might expect given his, lineage, and at the age of 6 he demanded to wear a soldier's uniform. While this whim was met, it was decided that an Austrian prince couldn't hold the rank of a lowly infantryman, so he was given the rank of sergeant instead. So 6 years old, already a sergeant, not bad, make daddy proud. From then on, Sergeant Franz Bonaparte would serve on sentry duty outside his grandfather's room, presenting arms to incoming visitors. By the age of 8, it was clear to his tutors that an army career would be the only sensible choice for the boy. One of them, the awesomely named Count Dietrich Stein, wrote to Marie-Louise, saying, and I quote, "The profession of arms is undoubtedly the only one he can embrace." Franz completed his elementary school studies in mid-1820, following which he started formal military training under, again, the awesomely named Dietrich Stein, Major Weiss and Captain Foresti. At the tender age of 9, Franz was already learning tactics, strategy, and the study of fortifications. As a reminder, he was barely into puberty at the time. The boy was clearly a natural, and he matched his thirst for knowledge with exuberant physical prowess. His tutors noted that he excelled at horse riding, swimming, and even wrestling. And I find it hard to imagine that anyone went all out against someone with the last name Bonaparte. One day in July of 1821, Captain Foresti pulled the shortest straw and had to give the boy some pretty bad news. On May 5th, Napoleon Bonaparte had died on the island of St. Helena. Before dying, the former emperor had expressed one final wish about his son: to never forget that he was a French prince. Despite having barely spent any time with him, young Franz was fascinated by the figure of his father, and for good reason. His tutors did not object to this, as they had not been instructed to teach Franz to dislike his father. Their official narrative was that Napoleon Bonaparte had been a military and political genius. His ambition, nonetheless, had eventually brought ruin upon France. Despite his father's last wishes, by the age of 12, Franz was entirely absorbed in the routine of an Austrian prince, and in the summer of 1823, he was appointed as an army cadet. The following year, Count Dietrich Stein sent another report to Marie-Louise, stating, and I quote once again, "He sparkles with wit, his conversation is finesse itself, and the consideration he has for everyone give him an ease that is far beyond his age." Other accounts agree that Franz was becoming a focused, hard-working, yet sociable and popular student, well at ease in both the barracks and the glitzy ballrooms of Vienna. He had all the makings of the planned Austrian aristocrat he was meant to become. At the age of 15, Franz was promoted to lieutenant, surely a reason to celebrate, but around that period his household staff and tutors first noticed that the young man was prone to colds, fevers, and frequent bouts of coughing. During the summer of 1828, Franz's mother visited Vienna, reuniting with her son. By now, he was a dashing 17-year-old, 6-foot-tall captain, and yet his health did not appear to improve. The following summer of 1829, Captain Franz took part in a large-scale military maneuver. He was now 18 and asked to be assigned for active service, but his superiors, probably influenced by the Emperor, declined on the grounds of his chronic poor health. In his 18th years, Franz first came across the Book of Memorial of St. Helena, an account of daily conversations between the author, and this is a name I hope I pronounced correctly, Emmanuel de las Casas, and the exiled Napoleon. This revived even further his interest and admiration of his illustrious and storied father, openly stating that, and I quote, "The principal aim of my life must be to never show myself unworthy of my father." In 1830, Franz bonded with a Major de Proksch Osten, who had studied Napoleon's tactics at Waterloo and publicly praised them in his writings. Franz probably saw the Major as a surrogate father figure, and the Major reciprocated the admiration by writing to a friend that the young prince was, and I quote, "knows more about the art of war than the cleverest of our generals." Franz reassured his new friend that he would always be loyal to Austria and her armed forces, but could never fight in a war against France. In March of that same year, Franz completed his military studies, and in July he was promoted to Major in the 54th Regiment of the Austrian Imperial Army. Another advancement followed in November as he became Lieutenant Colonel with the 29th Regiment. At this rate, Franz may have become a general in his 20s, however, he lacked one essential component that all generals of the time needed, actual battlefield experience. Throughout 1830, there could have been many occasions to prove his mettle as Europe was shaken by a wave of violent insurrections and counter-insurrection. For example, in July, the Second French Revolution forced King Charles X of Bourbon to abdicate the throne. In August, an uprising in the Netherlands led to the independence of Belgium. In November, a similar yet failed movement swept through Poland. And in all these cases, the rebels invoked the name of Napoleon II as their future leader. A German philosopher with the awesome name of Friedrich Gentz commented that the mere thought of Napoleon II being involved in European politics sent shivers down the spines of rulers across the continent. Sure, his dad has slipped into autocracy, but the name of the Bonapartes would forever be associated with revolution and anti-revolutionary struggle. Thus, the young Bonaparte would have made for a fantastic figurehead for rebels to rally around. The question is, would Franz have actually embraced any such cause? It seems that all Franz ever really wanted was simply to see some action, be it pro or against revolutions. In February 1831, a string of pro-constitutionalist uprisings broke out in central Italy, targeting the temporal authority of the Pope. Notable rebel leaders included Franz's own cousins, Napoleon Louis and Charles Louis Napoleon, the future Napoleon III. But when the uprising extended to Parma, threatening the rule of Marie Louise, Franz demanded to join an Austrian expeditionary force to crush the rebels, which, remember, included his own cousin with his own last name. This would have made for a very interesting confrontation and most likely an awkward family reunion. Emperor Franz, however, stepped in, preventing his grandson from joining the expedition. The young officer was thus confined to garrison duties, and by all accounts he made for a good officer, but his health continued to decline, dogged by respiratory ailments. His physician, Dr. Mulfatti, initially believed that Franz may be tormented by recurring pneumonia. It later became clear that the diagnosis was an even worse one: consumption, now known as tuberculosis. Dr. Mulfatti lamented that Franz had, and I quote, an iron spirit in a body of crystal, which is so badass a line, I want to use it for my next Baldur's Gate 3 character. Franz spent the first 3 months of 1832 under ordered bed rest. Mulfatti and other doctors argued that the young Bonaparte could benefit from living in warmer climates. For example, he could move to Italy and join his mother in Parma. According to the writer André Castelot, this option was vetoed by the powerfuler Chancellor Metternich himself. Later conspiracies theorized that Metternich had plotted to poison Franz, whom he considered a potential dangerous enemy. Castelot argued that Metternich didn't need to poison him, he simply had to let Franz die, and that, sadly, wouldn't take long. In May 1832, Franz received an appointment to colonel. This would be the last gift he received from his grandfather. 2 months later, on July 22nd, Napoleon Francois Charles Robert Bonaparte, or Franz, died in Vienna's Schaubraun Palace at the age of 21. His reported last words were, and I quote, "One final time, my birth and my death, that is my entire story. Between my cradle and my grave, there lies a big fat zero." So I hope everybody found this video interesting, educational, and entertaining. I certainly found the script to be all three of those things. If you did enjoy the script, follow the writer on social media, the links you can find below. Follow me if you are so inclined, and check out my own channels, Wiki Weekends and Facting with Carl Smallwood. Likewise, go check out Geographics and Top 10s, other biographics videos that I am the interim host of. And as always, I'd like to wish everybody at home the day that you all deserve. Cheers.